Incidentally, because the lens are operated by an involuntary nervous system, or not under voluntary control, it's terribly subject to the vicissitudes of hormonal action and emotion. So that all kinds of funny things can go on with your vision if you're in a state of rage, or if you're terribly depressed, or you're terribly excited, or whatever. Pardon? Blind with rage, yes. Blind with rage and green with envy. And yellow with cowardice. I don't know how these colors got. What's that? Yes, all red. Now I want to talk a little bit about binocular fusion. It's the ability to integrate data from the two eyes to form a single percept. Many ophthalmologists test one eye at a time. And there is no test to see whether or not the child is bringing the image into one fused percept. It's really complicated because there's no connection of any sort between the right and left eyes until the optic nerves reach the brain, and then it coordinates the two. If for some reason, the brain cannot get the images fused, then they will see two images. And this is when you get diplopia. Di meaning two. Now, this causes such strain that what usually happens is that the brain suppresses one of the eyes. It just says, I'm not going to take any more messages from you. Then a condition called amblyopia arises. This is a suppressed eye. And because the eye isn't doing anything functionally anymore, I mean, it can see, it can register light waves, and it can send off the right patterns of firing, but the brain isn't taking it. And eventually, that eye just wanders off and does what it just kind of isn't part of the team anymore. And large numbers of people now are discovered, increasing numbers of people have that. And in fact, lots of people have it and are not really consciously aware that they have it, because it switches back and forth from one eye to another, but you never get both eyes doing it at the same time. Yes, Doc?
Yeah, I was under the impression that people lost the vision in the other eye, but she has a boy in her class, the doctor said when he's 17, 15, can still see, but with both eyes, and
yeah,
has a lot of trouble with it.
Yeah, but no, you don't lose the vision in the eye.
My cousin was cross-eyed, and he actually doesn't have that.
He doesn't have any vision? It actually atrophied to that point, huh?
Yeah, and I understood that happened to a lot of people.
Well, I guess it depends on whether or not there's ever a switching back and forth. I think if there's
Apparently
he didn't switch at all. It was too painful. He was cross-eyed?
Yeah, he eventually had a cosmetic operation, but there's no vision in that eye.
Now, here's the position we've taken, that these operations, which cost enormously, are really for cosmetic reasons. And if they promise you that you're going to be able to see straight after the operation,
I thought they didn't earlier, they were
well,
There's a critical period.
there is a critical period, but even
And it's very young.
it's very young.
The period is before 2 or something.
But what we found out there, the lens and the muscles and the shape of the eyeball are all flexible, and it's better to just train the eye. Because what they do is they cut the muscle off, shorten it, stitch it back together again. And that may pull an eye that's out that way back in. But even if you do this, and this is where the guys who do the surgery are off base, the brain must now learn how to fuse that image with that eye, with the other eye. Otherwise, it'll go on just being suppressed, even though you've had the operation. So we set up a whole set of exercises. We've had several people now come who were very young kids who've had the surgery 2 or 3 times. And their eyes are looking straight at you now, but they're not seeing with one of the eyes. Yes.
You had said that sometimes you might have one eye and then the other, one eye and then the other.
Yeah,
so the brain receives one but not the other.
For instance, if the eye that you use most of the time is this one, and this one is the lazy eye, as they say, but we don't use it with children because it makes them feel like it's their fault because they're not trying hard enough. So we don't use that word, but that is the common word for it, the lazy eye. The minute you cover this eye, this one gets to work, unless the condition that Dot is talking about has taken place.
Do you ever have a situation where the brain will predominantly take the message from one eye, but will occasionally kick in the other?
That's
so
right.
It's an on and off?
That's right.
So you can have both being fused at sometimes, but not at others?
Well, and when it is fused, though, it's a strain. And that's precisely why, in fact, you get terrible headaches if you try to. We have a machine now which will take a normal person and split the image. And then you can feel subjectively the strain required to pull the image back together. And this lets you know what it's like for the child who's got the problem. You know he's not going to spend too much time reading, trying to hold all that print into one image. Yes, Doc?
It seems that what you say, it seems to me that there is an increasing incidence of this. Is there any reason why that is?
Well, this guy I'm working is willing to dump almost everything onto TV.
Oh,
But,
that's right, you told me.
but I don't know about that. No. A lot of eye problems. The increased number of eye problems, and not visual motor problems more than, say, amblyopia. Because you see, when a child is ordinary playing, look what's happening. He's picking up something. So that the movement of the eyeball to fixate on this is now coordinated with the motor cortex, not only for moving the eye, but for moving the hand. So that you get, through ordinary play, normal neurological patterning. Everything you see is coordinated with movement. Very few children are in the business of sitting passively observing like a hermit that's 92 years old. They are busy bouncing around. They're kicking things, climbing things, or manipulating things, or throwing things, all being coordinated with the movement of the eye. Now, what happens when a child watches television in the course of the year for more hours than he is in school? There is no relationship between what he is seeing on the TV screen and the movement of his hands. So there is no neurological patterning going to the motor cortex from the occipital lobe. Those wires, those pathways just aren't being established and being exercised and being used. This is our thesis. Could be wrong, but it's almost bound to be true that in experiments done with monkeys, for instance, where they're not allowed to move their hands but only see things, they develop visual motor problems. If you let a monkey see lots of things, but you put oatmeal boxes, round Quaker oat boxes on his arms so that he can't manipulate things, then he no longer is focusing his eyes on things that his hands are doing because his hands can't do anything. So you don't get any firing from the occipital lobe to the motor cortex going down to the hands. And these monkeys always have visual motor problems. And I can't imagine you haven't got a similar phenomenon going on with kids.
Can that be corrected with the monkeys? Have they tried that?
Well, no, and I don't know if they've tried it with the monkeys, but we've done it with the kids. If you can do it with the kids, you could probably do it with the monkeys. Because these kids behave like monkeys, right? I don't know whether that reasoning is terribly sound or not, but anyway.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
What kind of depth perception would a person have if they're only getting messages from one eye?
The depth perception that they have comes from non-binocular cues. For instance, you know that this cup is behind this because part of the cup is obscured by this. That is a non-binocular cue of depth. You know that things that are closer to you have a greater texture because you can see it better than things far away. There are many cues like that that a one-eyed person can pick up and give them a kind of pseudo-depth perception, but you cannot have true depth perception unless you have both eyes open, because what happens when both eyes are open is that this eye is seeing a little more of this side of all of you, and this eye is seeing a little more of this side of all of you, so there is a slight discrepancy on the images. And when the brain fuses them, it pulls you into 3 dimensions. Now, when you close one eye, everything is flat. However, there are shadows, there are all these other binocular cues. But the truth of the matter is, it's all flat for you. You just hold it for a little while and then open up the other eye and you just see how the 3 dimension just comes right into play. Now, associated with binocular fusion, yes?
I don't understand how this patching that they do bring encourages fusion at some point. Does it?
No, it doesn't.
Then what, then is the point?
Well, yes, well, we think there isn't much point.
So I see that being done still in play.
It's sometimes useful when that eye has been so suppressed that the nerve tissue has begun to deteriorate, and so you, in fact, let's see, what is my man doing? I think he is, I just have this vague intuition that he patches the weak eye, which is exactly the opposite from what you think ought to be done for some reason. I'll have to,
Ophthalmologist?
no.
Because an ophthalmologist will patch these swollen eyes for the child. This has to be like a 4-year-old.
Yes, sure. That's right.
My husband has the idea, he only sees out of one eye, but he has fantastic depth perception because he can shoot a basketball in any place and make a basket. I mean, his perception is amazing that he developed.
Could do it. Mhm.
Depth perception
With only one eye.
with only one
Mhm.
eye. That's perfect vision in one eye.
Yeah. Well, no, my man is an orthoptics specialist. And he's a kind of a breed, a hybrid of ophthalmologist and optometrist. And, but the man I got has begun to go through our doctoral program because he was hunting for a holistic framework, an organismic framework within which to understand his own theory. So, as soon as I arrived in California, I had these doggone bifocals, and I got them in Northampton, Massachusetts, and they weren't right. And I thought, well, people are grumpy about bifocals, and so I gave myself a month. And then I just knew that, I either had to go down like this or like this, and I just knew that wasn't normal. So I finally went to this guy. I asked my secretary, who lives in that area, who's good. She said, I know a good man. But he's not an ophthalmologist, he's an orthoptic specialist. So I went, and he really put me through the stuff. I'd never had such eye tests and everything. And he said, well, the bifocals have overcorrected things. And so you have to actually lift the page up this high, and you want it this distance. So he just changed it. But in the course of it, I told him what I was in California doing, and so he came into, he works with an optometrist. They're both in my doctoral program now. And we're getting ready. We've now opened up this clinic, and we're going to do an initial screening of all the students in one whole city. California law requires that you screen a student in the first grade and in the fourth grade. And he's found out that most of the problems happen in the middle. And so it's just, they just pick this age. I don't know, what does Connecticut do, Dot? Does it have a law? Do they do?
I don't know what the law says, but the school says.
Do you do it every year? And do they do near point?
I think they do, they have something. They check television too. There was just, I had that, of course, I always check, just like against the machine, finally when it does one now.
Well,
I was excited about the fourth grade. You know, and also our kids do start wearing glasses around fourth grade. Well, I don't know if there's any program around that. My ophthalmologist said that I didn't catch it in one of my kids, and he says it happens within a 2-month period.
yeah, it can sometimes, yeah. So it's tricky. Now, associated with binocular fusion is something else, namely convergence. See, when you're looking a long way away, your eyeballs can sort of be parallel. But the minute you bring it up close, now the eyes must move in order to maintain fusion. So convergence is a counterpart of fusion when you're talking about near-point vision. And that's what reading requires. Reading requires convergence in order to have binocular fusion. Now, if there are convergence problems, there will be headaches, or diplopia, or suppression of one eye, or headaches, or whatever. And the upshot of it is, it says later,
If there's suppression of one eye, would it necessarily
well, there probably will be in the initial stages, because the natural tendency is to try to accommodate the whole thing and make it work. And my daughter went through a year and a half of headaches. And I kept seeing... Pardon?
Share that, so that led into something.
That's right. She just... what? She was... then she was 13. Going on 14. And there are two things that used to irritate me in my house, that I find the aspirins are always gone, and the toilet tissue is always gone. Well, I found out why the aspirins were gone, and the reason the toilet tissue is gone is because they never learned how to use it sparingly. They wind up like this, you have 97 layers. So I realized when you train kids, when you toilet train children, you say, look, 3 or 4 sheets is sufficient at a time. You don't have to have 92 layers. Anyway, if a kid isn't taught, he won't know. That's for sure. And I finally said, who is just throwing the aspirin away? Well, I finally cranked out of her this thing that she is just practically living on aspirin, because she had these headaches all the time, and she stopped reading. Her grades went down. I sent her to a big specialist here, an ophthalmologist in Northampton. He prescribed new lenses. She wore them for a while, still on her aspirin, so on. And we went to California after I had my lens here and found this guy. I took her there. He found she had an eye that was practically, it was on the verge, he says, of becoming permanently useless. It was just wandering off, not doing anything anymore because there was suppression. So they put all kinds of, she wore glasses for a while. They were very thick on one side, looked like had Venetian blinds. And she wore that for 8 months, and then she now has contact lenses and is seeing very well, and she has fusion.
Why would an ophthalmologist find that?
Pardon?
Regular testing. Why would an ophthalmologist find that in their testing?
A lot of them just don't.
Because they're not looking for fusion?
They're not looking for fusion or whatever. This test, I'd never been put through such a test as this guy put me through, and I asked him to because I was interested. See, I wanted to have the full treatment. It cost me, but I got it. because it takes nearly an hour.
Is it that this person is so very innovative, or are there other people like this, let's say?
Yeah, there are a lot of orthoptics specialists around, but they're not very,
Are they accepted by the profession in general?
well, not very much, no.
There's a big argument between ophthalmologists and optometrists. And for a long time, what I heard was only optometrists would refer to orthotics clinics.
That's right.
I have inquired recently about orthotics clinics in Michael Clinic, and now they say they will only take prescriptions from ophthalmologists. But
They're still fighting. It really is disgusting because the kids are left holding the bag. And what we're trying to do out there is we're trying to find a congenial bunch of ophthalmologists, optometrists who will be integrated in our clinic. And
I thought they had said, somebody said they were going to a big conference and resolve all this. I take it it wasn't.
it's like the chiropractors and the AMA types getting together to resolve their differences. Of course, they have, at their last conference, they did make an enormous step forward in that. But anyway, the convergence problem, yeah, many children have, they just cannot do it. The muscles are not strong enough. And again, you need neurological patterning in order to do it. You have to have exercises. And this man I have says that many of the exercises are painful. And it's just like he's just like learning to stretch a muscle that you haven't stretched. If you want to be a dancer and you have to learn how to do the splits, well, there's no way you can learn how to do the splits without a little pain. See? And however, if you stick with it, muscles will stretch, and they will do it, and then the pain goes. And so there's a peak at which the pain threshold comes up, and then it goes down, then it disappears, and the person can't do the work. So I'm very interested in seeing what's going to happen over the next few more years. I got my computer terminal in last week. It arrived in a big box to put all the data on, and my printout machine is coming next month, and we're now working to decide.
Can you explain a little bit more?
Well, what we're putting on the computer is every symptom that the child has based on the extensive diagnosis, plus a lot of personal history, plus families, siblings, and all that. Then a prescription is made on the basis of the diagnosis, and the prescription is entered on the computer. And then the child comes into the clinic twice a week and does certain kinds of exercises. And for instance, we have a machine called an Exercore. Have you seen those, Don? They're a platform about this wide and about that long, and they have a square pad here and a square pad here, and they're on an iron cable, and they're on a track, wheels, and one on this side. And you put one knee here and one knee here, and one hand there and one hand there. And you can set the machine so it'll work in a variety of ways, so that you can move your knees and hands like this, contralaterally, or you can do it bilaterally so that both the right knee and the right leg go forward, and vice versa for the other. Or there's just a variety of patterns which you can set the machine to do. And then Mr. Ackerman, who's the orthoptic specialist, who's directing the clinic for us, has organized a way of putting a visual light signal. There's a green light and a red light, and then they wear green goggles and red goggles so that only one light can be seen. You can make a variety of patterns so that only the light comes in the left eye to signal a command for the right leg and the right arm, and vice versa. We can set this thing to do a whole lot of things, and it forces that pattern to go in one eye to the occipital lobe into the motor cortex, and you know that that's what's had to happen, or he can't perform the exercise. And you get him to do it, he comes in until he can do it right away, and then you know that you're getting the patterning going. Then pretty soon his reading problem clears up and everything else. So,
That's already happened.
oh yes.
So that gross motor movements like that clear up reading patterns.
Yep. Now, you can say it's a Hawthorne effect. You can say, and this is what ordinary skeptical people say. You know what a Hawthorne effect is, don't you all? And of course, some lady said, she said, well, I don't mind paying for a Hawthorne effect if the kid can read. Still, it would be. I mean, there must be a less expensive Hawthorne effect that you can organize than that. But we have built in a kind of research effort now to really pin down. And this is why we want to put it on the computer, because the way we're going to put it on the computer, it'll enable us to retrieve information in a variety of ways. For instance, with sex, with age, with experience, and every day that the child comes in, we assess how he's doing after he's done his exercises, and that's entered on the computer. So we plot the graph of his improvement over time, and we can associate this with all kinds of things, age, whatever. So we begin to get a real sense of how it's working. A couple of other things. One is stereopsis, which is the depth perception that comes out of binocular vision. Poor stereopsis is usually an indication of poor binocular or incomplete binocular fusion. Then the field of vision refers to coordination between what's going on in the periphery and what's going on in the fovea. You can see with the eyes steady 200 degrees this way, and I think 135 degrees this way. So it's amazing how much the eye is actually taking in. And the child does have to learn how to be sensitive to movement in the periphery so that he can move the eye. The informed perception is largely tied in with cognition. It means being able to store particular shapes and contours. And of course, for reading, this is absolutely essential. Well, we don't have time for a break. I want to pass some things out to you.
Just on a young child, can you catch the types of problems that are
Yeah.
being picked up with reading on someone little?
Yeah, you can, I mean, this checklist will contain some of those things. Yes. Yes.
I'm in the high school,
Yeah.
and we ordered in the high school a science program, an activity-oriented type of program, rather than a classical academic science book. Because we need to have a book that youngsters who read at 4th and 6th level could use. Now we have a member on our Board of Education who is opposed to this because this kind of material is not, quote, academic enough. There's an activity-oriented science type of program. We have to defend this science program. We should have any materials that we could do that a lay person would understand that it's appropriate for high school youngsters with learning problems. An activity-centered type of science.
Well, I don't know if I could put my hands on any particular materials, but the point is, if you insist that they do something they can't do, you set them up for a failure, and it's a dead loss. On the other hand, I'm also sympathetic to his point of view, namely, how did they get there at this point and not have their problems remediated?
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't like the books. That's his opposed to the books. It doesn't matter where his orientation is as a college level professor, and he does not like these books. But meeting the needs of the students, because they had failure before, and
Sure.
now they're going to have success. Well, we have to
Well,
document.
why don't you ask him what he would suggest instead?
But we have to have it before the Board of Education meeting.
I heard something about this, but isn't he thinking that that book's being used for all age graders?
No.
I mean, I can see
No, just phase two.
Oh, it's only.
I'll keep my eye open for things, though. Have a look at this. I just want to take you through it quickly. Under Category 1, just has to do with the physical appearance of the eyes. Sometimes you can tell when, even before a child starts learning how to read, one eye is just off a little bit. The eyelids or eyes are red. You may have unusual amount of tearing. You might have encrusted eyelids, or eyelids have frequent styes. Those are all indications that something isn't quite right, possibly. Maybe they just stayed up too late. Then there may be some complaints. Itching or burning eyes, aches in the forehead, blurring of image, dizziness or nausea. Then there's a whole set of indicators of visual motor problems. That one category has to do with ocular motility. It's the ability of the eye to move. And these are all really pretty self-explanatory. You know, usually a young child that's had any encouragement or good modeling loves doing work with paper and pencil. If suddenly you've got a young child who's had that sort of modeling who won't do it, and doesn't want to do it, that may be a sign that they tire quickly when copying. Is the symptom there. For binocularity, which has to do with eye coordination abilities, if you're not getting good fusion, the kid will often do this. You'll see him just going like this. He'll just hold one eye shut. Or he'll squint. He's doing the same thing. Or he may tilt his head excessively. I've seen this lots of times in schools. And this man I have, we step into a school, he'll say, 7th kid down on the right, 3rd one down on the 4th row, 2nd one over from the last. Take them out for screening, just by their posture and the way they're tilting the head, the way they're looking at the page. And then we looked at the papers that they write. The writing is crooked, what they put on the paper is poorly spaced, can't trace lines accurately, so on. Well, these are all really just perfectly self-explanatory. And so I went through his files, and I went through several books, and I put this together, hoping that if you don't have something like this, I don't know whether you do, maybe you do, Dot, do you?
No, I do know that I always look.
These sorts of things.
Yeah, it says recording is back, I suspect. It doesn't focus right, that I know.
Yeah.
This is much more systematic.
Yeah.
I do a very global kind of
Yeah.
evaluation. This would be very helpful.
As a matter of fact, the kid was rubbing his eye now.
And you see, you get, if you have just one of these, well, maybe not, but once you begin to get several of these in various categories, then you can be pretty sure there's something wrong somewhere.
I guess my question is, if we come up with what looks like a lot of these, what are we saying we want to refer that child as far as?
Well, this would enable you to mount a political force that would enable you to hire my entire operation to create such a clinic here as we're having there.
Because I was just going to say that what I think is happening is we can tell the parent the child needs to have his eyes checked. And the parent will
You
go
send them
out.
to San Diego?
Really? And they'll go out and have the eyes checked.
Particularly the reading problem and the photographing the eyes and some of the other things?
Well, we have a telebinocular, we have the extracord, we have tegistoscope, and we have an eye camera, sophisticated eye camera device that shoots a beam of light that is reflected off the cornea and goes on a film that is moving like a movie film. And there's one for each eye, and you ask the child to go through a number of visual tasks. And you can analyze, you can just show these strips, and you can see exactly what his eyes do. And if the eyes are teaming properly, you'll get a double line that looks something like this. and the other eye will be just like that. But we often get this. One eye's doing one thing and the other eye's doing something else. And right away, you know, the kid's got a problem. We've never had a kid that had an eye photography profile like that wasn't having terrible troubles learning how to read.
At what age should something like the program that you're advocating be done by? In other words, if he actually gets to high school as a teenager, could he be helped?
Yes, he can be, but it takes a long time. And
it's very expensive.
in our experience, well, I'll tell you what our fees are. It costs $45 to have the original screening, which takes about an hour. And then it costs $10 a half an hour for 2 half-hour sessions, so it's $20 a week for doing the exercises under supervision. You have a specialist there making them go through the exercises. And it often takes up to, get rid of these, it often takes up to 6 months to get them over it. So it does mount up, but when you compare that tiny investment with what the kid is going to lose in unemployment and poor jobs for the rest of his life because of this disability, it's just a drop in the bucket. And nowadays, a lot of insurance companies are covering this sort of thing. And I think with public law 90, what is it? 142. It's, at least in the version that we have in California in 1980, school districts will have to pay for all of this. If a diagnosis shows that a child has this problem, then he must have a remediation. And if you don't have a specialist in the school system to provide that, then in California in 1980, you will have to send the child to a private clinic and pay for it. Now, so we have a whole master's degree program based on this, because we're going to start preparing such people for the schools, because there's an... Pardon? But we're just doing visual screening and visual motor development. We're not claiming to be an ophthalmologist. And if there is we don't prescribe glasses. However, we can tell if the child needs glasses, and then we'll refer them to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist. Or if there is hemorrhaging in the retina or whatever else, we can send them to an ophthalmologist. But we're not claiming to be a medical clinic.
Dan, the visual motor kinds of problems, the frosting material, balance beam, and all of that, some of those techniques.
For now.
Yes, I mean those are useful techniques.
That fits into
Yeah, which we were all told.
The thing
was
is that,
not true.
well, I know, isn't it you? What can you do? That's why I have to collect my own data and find out. But my own thesis is that the way we've set things up, we're pretty sure that we can force the neurological patterning to take place by virtue of the goggles, the light signals, and the ability to set the pattern that you want on the extracorp. And because there's no other way that the left eye can get the signal except through if you've got the goggle on, if you've got a green goggle on and the green light is shining or the red light is shining or whatever, you can set it so that it blocks off and admits the channel in only one way. You can be sure it's getting to where you want it to go. I'm hoping I can talk some people from this area to come out and take our summer program. Doc, what about you? Laura? Oh, sure. Take a leave of absence. Take a sabbatical leave,
Yes,
which
just-
the school...
George, could I see you about a sabbatical?
You have an application for 10 sabbaticals, George. Apply for not only sabbatical, but a scholarship to go with it.
Of course.
There is a summer program.
Oh, yes, we have a summer program in this. Starts on June, I think it's June 30th.
Dan,
Yes.
some of the things that we do for a visual motor concern, we use the Berry test or Bendick.
Yes.
These would be, these are the kind of things you'd be picking up on the eye-hand coordination. That would be an indirect.
Sure. This is kind of a gross measure for a parent or a teacher who, if they knew all of these things, just read over and then begin to, if they begin to see some of these things recurring, they might then be suspicious, and then that would be a sign to go for a referral.
The problem I'm having diagnosis, again, the question that I asked of our medical consultant, two questions really for an LD evaluation. One, was there some kind of brain damage? And there's a residual effect that is interfering. And that comes from developmental history of motor unexacted, one of those critical periods. We're now looking at it. Or is there something progressive, dietary,
Whatever.
What I'm hearing you say is there may have been some critical periods or sensitive periods where these patterns have not been developed, and we're not so darn concerned with some pathology or some kind of injury, but reestablishing those patterns.
That's right.
I'm oversimplifying.
No, but that's exact. You see, the point is that they have to make the assumption there's brain damage, even though there's no histological evidence for it. And nobody's going to cut open the brain and see if they can find it.
Yeah, so we run an EEG and all the other, nothing.
And most of the time you won't
No
pick up.
soft signs.
You won't pick up anything.
Right.
And since there is more than one way to skin the cat, we tried to create a prescription of activities that establishes proper neurological patterning. Yes.
Caroline, you're working with some youngsters with visual motor problems. What are some things that you're able to do, and what success are you having? Or extensive success?
Well, basically what we've done is start off with doing tracking and those kinds of things, analyzing, getting into more intricate contours, mazes, those kinds of things. I don't really know. It's really a big, has been a hassle for years. Can you really truly see if you are doing it?
Is there much documents or evidence or are you going to provide that?
No, this, you see, I wouldn't have gotten into it with this man, but I looked at his records. He's been doing it for 6 years. And he operates a poorly put together kind of center in one of the school systems. He was a teacher. I mean, he had a terrific background in orthoptics. He studied in London. He worked in optics for the Air Force and for the Navy, and really knows an awful lot about the physics of optics and so on. Then he's taken tons of courses in neurology of the eye and brain functioning and this and everything else, and he just got fed up being in school. He was just, he taught social studies or math or whatever by having kids that he discovered couldn't see. And he just gradually switched over and he talked the school system into operating this clinic, and a great consternation among the local optometrists and ophthalmologists and so on. But he collected such convincing data that he was taken on by an optometrist, 2 of them.
Do you find then that the academics are improving as well?
Oh, yes. And I've now had a chance to watch him work with kids, and he's a real solid father image type. He's very warm, but he's absolutely no nonsense with these kids. When they come in, they really know there's a treatment to be had. And they really respond to that. They know it's serious business, and he's a busy man, but he'll take all the time that's necessary in order to get you over the hump. And, well, he trained a whole battery of parents to do a lot of the screening. And they do a lot of the screening, and they're so thankful that their kids are over the hump that they come back.
But you really, so far, this is just, it's a clinical thing. You don't have a bibliography or anything you can look at?
Oh, yeah, we have a bibliography.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll put one together for you if you like. Yeah, sure, yeah. And, but if you go through the bibliography, you're gonna find terribly contradictory results. But then that's the way science is generally anyway, so.
To diagnose, prescribe.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's right. In fact, it's now being refined so that on a computer we have symptom 922, prescription 437, and the card pops up and gives the whole prescription. Hope it works. I'll let you know. I have some other reprints that I was